My parents taught me you absolutely are not too old at any point to change your careers and build back up if you're willing to maybe scale back a little bit for a short time financially. Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host of the Money and You Show. And my head's blocking money, but money's up there somewhere. So Money and You Show. We are here every week helping you to understand your relationship with money, first and foremost. Whether you know it or not, you have one, and it's super significant in your life, driving a lot of your decisions. So really good to understand that better, get an awareness of it, what's going on when you make those decisions. And from there, we also are trying to bring you great financial information so you can learn more, because a big part of your relationship with money is built on just knowing more. And that improves your confidence and your ability to go out there in the world and be an empowered money manager for yourself and for your family. And allow you to have some fun with money. Money's no fun when you don't know anything about it and it feels like a big, huge mystery to you. But when you do, when you start getting, knowing what to ask, knowing enough to be dangerous, and then building on that, you do start to kind of energetically attract more good information around money, more people who know what they're doing. It's really a pretty powerful system to build that money relationship. It's the start of everything. So I have a couple of relationships I want to talk about today. I'm going to do a solo show with you about my money relationship and where that comes from. And a lot of it comes from my mom and, my family in general, but mostly my mom, who talked to me a lot about money. I very recently lost my mom and am super sad about that. But she was 88, so she lived a wonderful life and a long life. And the last 7 or 8 months have not been great for her. You might have heard some of my shows about, aging. That's kind of where that comes from because I've been taking care of her. And so as much as I miss her, she has not been doing well in recent months. And so I am happy for her that she is not suffering at all. And but it's made me reflect a lot, pretty much all the time, on her and what she brought to my life and what she taught me. And she taught me a lot about money. So I really want to just talk a little about my mom's wisdom around money. She would never necessarily tell you that she was wise around money until later in life, really. She became kind of a funny investor person late in life. She got really interested in investing and was playing with it a lot and doing it a lot. And so I'll get there. That also made me help me learn some more too. She was sharing a lot because she was excited about it. So, but I'm going to go back to just how my mom taught me some things about money. It may help you. It may help you if you have children to recognize the importance of actually talking to your kids about money and the specifics of how to do things. So, I'm going to start just back in the day when my mom showed me how to use a checkbook. I remember it so clearly, which is so bizarre because so much I don't remember about my life. But I remember her sitting down with checks and the little check register and explaining how to fill out a check, which actually my kids have a lot of trouble with. She showed me what you were doing. The fact that when you wrote that check, it was coming out of a bank account and you had to track it and you had to, subtract out the checks from the balance. And so super, super basic. But from an early age, I understood a bank account. She taught me about your checking account and your savings account and, how important it was to save because there was interest and, you're making money by doing nothing but just sticking money in an account. So that was the start. And I was pretty young. I don't know, maybe I was 10, And I found it interesting. I also found it useful, and she made me do it. So I got an account and a checkbook, and I had to, do my little checkbook thing. So that was the start. And it was interesting because my mom, even though my dad made the majority of the money, he was out earning the money, and my mom was home taking care of us for a while. And at that time, though, it was also, even though she didn't say it, you could obviously observe that she was the money manager in the house. She was paying the bills. She was balancing that checkbook. She was, doing all of those things, putting money in savings and just overseeing everything. And I think it was really important for me to know that. Like, I think a lot of times families don't really talk to their kids about money, and they, nobody explains necessarily how, they are doing money as parents. But I thought it was really good for me to know that because I sort of saw my mom in a different light. Like, she was kind of in charge. I mean, she was doing a lot of ironing and cleaning, but she was also managing the money. And that was like, in a way, sort of like an elevated space for her to be in, where she was controlling that and then the spending. And she had a budget, and she knew, how much things were. So she was really kind of in charge of that. And I think it was really good to see that. She and my dad would have a lot of these money discussions, and they were never fights. I never heard my parents fighting about money. And there were probably some disagreements that occurred, but that was one thing that I think I'm grateful for. There was no arguing. I didn't feel like my parents' money stress. And honestly, I'm not even sure I can say that for my own kids. They probably heard a little money stress from my husband and I, but, so that was a real benefit because I didn't grow up seeing money as a negative. I didn't hear stress around money. There was one point, which I'm going to get to, where there was stress about money, but they didn't get overly emotional about it. But they talked about it a lot. Like after dinner, the kids would go away and my parents would sit and have tea and talk about things. And I'm sure some of what they were talking about was money, but there was always kind of this implied thing that we make these decisions together. And so I think that was interesting, just to see that there was this communication between them. And clearly my mom was taken, pretty seriously as a money manager person. There was a time when my dad made a huge career shift, which is why, in fact, I went into career coaching early on when I started my company, Limit Free Life, because my dad made a huge career shift in midlife. He had been an orthodontist with a very successful practice. We did really well. And he didn't want to do that anymore. He was getting kind of depressed about it. He really didn't want it. He wanted to go back to school, actually, and go into research and teaching, which he did. And it was a big deal. He had to go back to school and start over, basically. So huge decision. And my mom was fully backing him, even though my mom's friends were literally telling her she should divorce my dad because he wanted to do this. And that was clearly about money, clearly about their money beliefs and this idea that, oh my gosh, you're going to go from making a lot to making nothing and it's going to destroy your life. And my mom, wasn't concerned about that. So she wanted to support my dad, and she wanted him to be happy. It's no fun living with somebody who's depressed about their career. And so, but I watched her kind of navigate this, and I sort of watched how they were doing things, because clearly the financial picture had changed, and we moved, and we had sold our nice vacation home, and we sold our big fancy Wellesley house. And so we moved from my dad's first job, which is actually in California. And ultimately, we bought a house and apparently couldn't afford it, and downsized in the same town that we had moved to, bought a smaller house. And then my mom went back to work. So, there was all kinds of money things going on. Clearly, they had kind of misjudged a few things probably. And that was interesting to watch too, because, again, they made these money decisions together, and they did what they needed to do. And it wasn't, a huge emotional problem, I guess. I didn't hear it anyway. And but my mom did go back to work, and her first job back to work was at Bullock's in Westwood as a salesperson. She hadn't worked in about 16 years. She actually had a journalism degree and had worked in that a little bit before she got married. So, one thing I took away from that too is sometimes you have to start where you have to start. So she hadn't worked in a long time, and she I think she tried a secretary job and kind of didn't know how to use things like copiers and stuff because she hadn't been working a long time. And so that got scrapped, and then she went to Bullock's. And so she did that for a while and really had fun with it. She knew it wasn't her ultimate goal, but it was a way back into the job market, back into, learning how to work again and earn money. And from there, she built out a whole second career. And they moved a lot because of my dad's job, and he was building his new profession in academia. And so they moved a few more times. And she ended up really following her passion. My dad was following his passion. She was following her passion by getting into first fundraising for charities and cancer research, a bunch of different things that were actual jobs. And she got very good at that, and then started getting, taking some courses in that and things like that. And then ultimately worked for a foundation giving away money to charities, big foundation in Houston. And the people she worked with, it was very interesting because she worked for someone who had this foundation because he had built a huge oil business, and he had grown up in complete poverty. And from start, I think he was a foster child actually, and he built this huge company in the oil business and then wanted to give back. So he had this foundation, and my mom's job was to give the money away. So she had a lot of experience working with charitable organizations and could really see the value of earning money, because then you can give money away. And in giving that money away, she also saw how far that money stretched. So money, they would give money away to charities, and she would visit the charities, and they'd take her around and show her where the money was going and how it was being used. And so, money kind of took on a pretty positive kind of viewpoint in her mind, obviously. And I don't know that she ever had an issue with that. But, if we're talking about money relationships, money could be seen in that light as a really, world-changing positive thing. So I just found all of that very interesting, how money played out and how work played out, and how both of them really in the middle of their lives started out kind of at the bottom in new professions and worked their way up. So, if you've ever thought, oh, I'm too old to do this, my parents taught me you absolutely are not too old at any point to change your careers and build back up if you're willing to maybe scale back a little bit for a short time financially. And just how to manage it. They just managed their finances. They didn't get into huge angst about things. They looked at the numbers, and I'm pretty sure it was my mom doing most of the looking at the numbers, and then they made whatever adjustments they needed, and ultimately they built back up to a very good place, and were able to retire well and build a beautiful new house later in life. So those were good lessons. So it was kind of a work evolution. And then at this later part of my mom's life, my dad had always been the investment guy. It was kind of like mom was the personal money manager and dad was, the higher level investment guy. I remember at the house years ago, before we had computers, every single day we would get these graphs in the mail. And I mean, super complicated, weird graphs that my dad would pore over in his office at night, and basically was looking at all these different stocks and companies and seeing where their earnings and, all the details were in these graphs. And he would look at all these things and they would make decisions. And hard to imagine now, actually, the work involved in that. But so my mom wasn't the investment person, but then she got interested in it, like really interested later in life. I remember when my kids were really little, we would go to visit them, and my mom was obsessed with Jim Cramer and whatever that money show was. He was so loud, and my kids would watch it with her. She would make them watch it. And, he was so animated that I suppose they had no idea what they were watching, but at least watching him was kind of fun. And so she learned a ton of stuff from him. And then she started reading all of his books, and then she started reading other people's books. And then she started investing in things that she liked. So she invested in Whole Foods, and she invested in Target, and she had a really fun time with this. First, she pretend invested, which is kind of a smart thing to do. So she just played like with pretend money, and she would put, pretend money in and see where it went, see if she made money or lost money, which is a really smart way to do it. And then she started for real investing. And it was interesting because they had a lot of managed accounts, but then they had the mom accounts, and they made sure, that there was enough money for my mom to play with in these investment accounts. And even when I took over their finances, in the last 6 months, there were accounts I couldn't get into because they were mom's accounts and only mom could manage them. And so she was pretty serious about it, actually. And she would read those reports and move money around and make trades. And and then something came in the mail for her, and I was talking to her financial advisor, and apparently she had just requested, just like in the last year, to be an options trader or something. Like, she had the strategic options trading eligibility form, and that she was all excited about. So we didn't go there because she wasn't able to do that anymore. But it was funny to see how into this she was getting. So, but she actually had a friend too who had, this is where she started to really get the investing bug, was her friend who had bought some very valuable stock very, very early on in her life. And maybe she had worked for the company and she had a lot of this stock, and it was a big name company. Can't remember what it was, but something we'd all recognize. She bought a lot of it, or earned a lot of it. And that stock just blew up and allowed her to leave a terrible marriage and do all these things. And she became very wealthy from this. And I think my mom saw that and was just like, oh, this is so cool. This is a way women can, really create freedom in their life. And so she just decided she was going to learn how to do it. So my mom was kind of, a bit of an inspiration in terms of money. It was never something that she avoided, that she didn't, if she didn't understand it, she tried to learn. She was interested in it. It enhanced her life in many ways, especially in terms of the charitable giving aspect, and just, creating security and things for herself. And so I just thought I would share that because it's important to talk about money with your kids. You will leave them, even if they're acting like, they're not listening or they don't care, you will in fact be leaving them with information that they will build on and use at some point in their life, where it'll just get into their psyche and it will help develop this relationship with money. Their belief systems and their thoughts and ideas around money are going to be shaped by you, mom and dad, whoever is listening to this. And it's super important to remember that. And, if you have been told things by your parents, sometimes it's also good to go back and think back to what they once said, and maybe you'll learn a few things. I know my husband was always annoyed by the things his dad would tell him to do with money, like, always have $100 bill in your wallet no matter what. And he thought that was super stupid, and he used to make fun of him. And I now always carry a $100 bill in my wallet because I think, and there's two things about that. One is that sometimes you just plain old need some cash, and that's great. But it was a little emergency money that got in a separate part of your wallet. The other thing about that another money coach had talked about was, your wallet is a little reflection of your relationship with money. And so make sure it's not like a mess. It doesn't have, old scraps of paper and torn up receipts in it. And, it's the kind of wallet that reflects somebody who knows what they're doing with money, and it's clean and put together well and looks nice. And also, when you carry a big bill around like that, I mean, we can argue about whether that's a big bill anymore, but it is a big bill. And if you carry something like that around, it creates a sense of care, walking around with some abundance with you. And instead of having like, $1.50 in your wallet, which is how I used to walk around. And it's just a sense of identity that is helpful. So that also, these tiny little things help shape your relationship with money. So I'll wrap up there. And thanks, Mom. So appreciate everything that you did for me, including helping me at an early age with money. So thanks for listening. Glad to see you here and be with you today. And if you like the show, please leave a review or like or share it with your friends. We're found on all the podcast platforms and Roku and the Limit Free Life YouTube channel. Love to hear from you. Michelle, 2 L's, at limitfreelife.com. And please go to my website and catch my weekly newsletter. You can get on my email list, find out what's going on. I'll be sending more information about my upcoming September Money Date program. And if you're on my newsletter list, you'll be one of the first to hear about that. And I'll be sharing more financial tips, advice, and goodness in my newsletter on a regular basis. So join my email list. Thanks so much. Thank you, UBN Go, for helping me do this show, and see you next week.